Hi everyone. Very good evening to all of you. My name is Anuja, your English mentor from LegalEdge, and I welcome you to today's session. I know for sure that this is going to be super useful for all of you who are targeting Clat 2023 because look what we are doing today. We are solving the most important questions for Clat 2023. Now, of course, I am not claiming that these are the questions that are going to come in the paper because I'm not allowed to do that. I can't really do that, but I can tell you that this is the variety. This is the question type that can be expected. Okay, so what are we doing today? You and I are reading together. Please be with me on this. I need a few prerequisites from you guys. So go get a piece of paper, something to write on, something to write with. Okay, because I want you to be involved, and it's very difficult to be involved unless you're writing. Okay, you can't do everything mentally. So go get something to write on, something to write with, and we'll get started. We'll be doing three RC passages, usual length, short RCs, very relevant question types. I am not expecting correct answers. I just want you to try. Even if you're a bit unsure, please try solving them with me. So I will give you proper reasoning for the correct answer. I will also tell you why we are rejecting other answers. And as long as you are not ready, as long as not you haven't thought it through, it will not be possible for you to understand and appreciate the reasoning. Okay, so let's get right into it. Most important questions for CLAT 2023. I'll have to go slowly because I am going with everybody here. So let's go. This is the first part of the first RC. Please let me know when you are done reading. I feel all of you should be done in 2 minutes. Okay, there you go. I am hoping that you have read this much, and I am going to quickly summarize this for you. I'm going to highlight the relevant parts. So, to me as a reader, the beginning is the most important thing, and it should be the same for you as well. So, students, as I see in the very beginning, they say that America, we're talking about America, it's a model of flexibility. And what do we mean by flexibility here? It's related to job market, the rate at which people come, the rate at which people go. We're talking about that sort of flexibility. So America is a model of flexibility. Millions of workers quit or they are sacked and then they are hired. So it's a continuous process of firing, hiring, like that. But what has happened recently that American job market has become less dynamic. So this flexibility is reducing. I hope you got that. This is also called turnover. An author says that the turnover is going down. Now, why could that be so? There are some structural changes in the economy which are causing this. So they mentioned certain things. For example, the number of new jobs that are being created that are less in number. Companies are investing in their employees, so it's there is a sort of unsaid contract between employees and employers, and they tend to stay for longer. There are trainings provided, so basically people don't leave that fast, and that is why we don't need to hire them that fast. Okay, So that is what we have learned so far. Let us build on that. Let us remember whatever we have achieved so far. Let us build on that by moving to the next part of this RC. If you're not watching this video live, if you're watching it later, you can also pause the video, read at your pace. I am a firm believer of accuracy. Speed is going to eventually come to you, but you must understand. So, what has happened in this part of the RC? The problem has further been analyzed. We are told that earlier there was an employment at will kind of doctrine where people would recruit as they pleased and then they would fire as they pleased, but it's not the case anymore. People really need to think a lot before firing anyone, and that is why they think a lot before hiring anyone. Okay, so since this is something which is taking the problem further, we are also told about the information revolution, where we get to see about exacting hiring. So, what is exacting hiring in this regard? This is about how all the jobs are becoming, all the hiring is becoming more and more demanding. It's not just the interview that you give there. Your employees have an access to every information, piece of information about you out there. So they know about your credit history, they know about your Facebook postings, and that is why the least educated are facing the most brunt. Okay, so I think it's time to weave everything together. What did we talk about? We talked about turnover, flexibility in the context of America. We discussed that it is reducing. We discussed why it is reducing. So we talked about the structural changes in the economy. In the end, we understood about exacting hiring. Okay, so on all based on all the information that we have so far, let us head towards the question one by one. Remember, there is a concept of negative marking in Clat. So if you get a right one, you get a plus one, but if it's a wrong one, you get a minus 0.25. I guess you already know that. But if you're playing too safe and you just leave it unattempted, you're going to get a big fat zero. Okay, so let us please start answering the first question. I'll give you some time to think about your response. Okay, everyone. So this is a contextual vocabulary question. You might have heard about turnover in a different context. Maybe it's related to revenue and profits. But if you check the context here, what is turnover about? It is not just the fall in unemployment. It is not just the hiring. It is the rate. It is the rate at which both of these things are happening. Employees are leaving and new ones are joining. So this is why the answer to question number one is D. So, what is my tip to you here? Compare all the options, choose the most complete. So, in this case, if an option is only talking about an employee leaving, it would be incomplete because I need both. I need leaving and coming, right? Another thing that I would say here is whenever you see a contextual vocabulary question, you need to go back to the passage, you need to read the context, and you'll get an idea. Okay, and if you're following the QPO method, which means you have seen the questions first already, then you all, oh, you know that you have to pay attention to turnover. When you see that, you can just understand the context. All right. So that was question number one for you. Let us move towards question number two. The author of the passage mentions all of the following in structural changes in the economy. You remember we talked about structural changes that depresses turnover, that reduces turnover, except which one was not there? So go slowly, think about every option. Was there any mention of fewer new businesses being established? Employees unlikely to change job in big companies. Remember the example of Walmart. The commitment of groomed employees, the employees who have received training and everything towards the organization. All these things were mentioned. But what was not mentioned was A, nothing about part-time workers. So yes, here we got the answer. This question type just depends on your observation skills. If you remember the question, whenever the passage mentioned structural changes, you just have to pay attention and you'll get the answer. Okay, moving on to the third question here. The author of the passage mentions exacting to imply that. I mean, what is he trying to hint by saying exacting? Try to remember the context where we read exacting. Remember exacting hiring, where employees had access to whatever a potential candidate has done on internet. Was it just about Facebook? No. Was it just about the measures to stimulate the American economy? Was it about morally compromised? So you just have to see what is irrelevant, what is a slight part. And when you think like that, you will realize the answer should be D. Because when author said the hiring has become very exacting, he meant that it has become very demanding. And the people who are least educated are suffering the most. That is why his suggestion, his hinting is towards the fact that firms should be a little less harsh in their assessment because you have online information and you can use that information to inculpate, that is to blame a candidate. So another question on contextual vocabulary, not to check your knowledge but to check your observation and thinking skills. Now the last question, which is I believe the toughest question of this set, is this one. The author of the passage is most likely to agree with all of the following statements except. So you either have to choose an option which he disagrees with, or you have to choose one which he hasn't even mentioned. You cannot choose something that he agrees with. Here, I'd like to go option by option so that I can give you more clarity. Let's read option A. Inflexible labor markets are making it harder for the less educated young to climb up the job ladder. Do you remember this was our discussion towards the very end? So, yes, this is something that author agrees with. Let's read option B. Protection for workers, which make it difficult for employers to sack permanent employees. Remember that hiring at will, firing at will, but now that is not possible. Employees are protected. So this was something again that he mentioned. Okay, what about option D? A policymaker should remove artificial barriers that keep workers out of relatively unskilled but better paid occupations. Relatively unskilled. Do you remember that example about massage or braiding? These are relatively unskilled jobs, less skilled jobs, but they also require something called occupational licensing. This is what it is about. But I did not find this one. This one says higher turnover leads to increased productivity, which author never said. He discussed the problem of decreasing turnover, but he never said that higher turnover has increased productivity. I did not get that sentiment after reading. Okay, so we are dealing with information here, observation, mood, take on a particular thing, and of course, vocabulary. That's what CLAT is all about. So, whenever you tackle an RC, think about what you're reading, theme, how is the author feeling, tone, what is the scope of the reading, which is the extent of the discussion, and if there is a word that is asked in a question type, then think about the meaning as well. Okay, so that is done. 1 out of 3, done and dusted. I hope you scored a decent part there. Let us move on to your second RC for this exercise. Let's get started. Similar fashion, we'll be continuing in similar fashion. All right, students, I hope you're done reading till this point. So, what are we dealing with here? We are comparing what the government thinks about American businesses and what businessmen think. And if you are reading correctly, these are two different things. So, America's states and cities have traditionally tried to attract businesses by offering them tax breaks, cash incentives, because they thought that this is where dissatisfaction lies. It's about taxes. But when they did the survey, they realized that it's not about taxes at all. People feel that they are paying their fair share of taxes. They are not undertaxed, they are not overtaxed. Then what? Government has been wrong all the while. What are the complaints about? The complaints are basically about the difficulty of complying with complex regulations. So, this is what we call red tapeism. This is what bureaucratic procedure is. It's long, it's lengthy, it's corrupt. most of the times. And that is what they're complaining about, the difficulty of complying with complex regulations. That's their problem. Okay, a score has been shared with you here. So Texas has done well if we talk about business friendliness, ease of doing business. Texas has done well, but California and Illinois have flunked their test. That means they have failed their test. They're doing a rating system. So Minnesota has got a B. Okay. If I talk about Washington, that's on a C. And if I talk about Florida, that's on a C plus. Okay. Oh, so sorry about that. Yeah. So that's on a C plus. And just remember that you may need it in your question. So moving on to the next and the last part of the passage. If you're with me, if you're paying attention, I think please understand Dennis Kessler's case. I would suggest try to focus on what that case is about, what is happening there, and also in the end, try to think about what Chicago is doing. And more than what, you should think about why. Because what is given there, why is not given there, that will be asked. Why did Chicago do whatever it did? Okay, people. So I guess you must have noticed that Dennis Kessler's case was just an example to show how bureaucratic procedures can be very unhelpful, how a lot of time is invested in them, but we don't really get the results that we want. He spent 30 hours trying to do something that he later found out can't really be done. Okay. What Chicago is doing here is it is forbidding food trucks from operating within a working radius of restaurants. And I think you can understand they're trying to protect restaurants from unfair competition because food truck owners obviously do not have those kind of overheads and they can sell food for cheaper. It would be unfair competition for the restaurant owners. Now, this is just trying to check your understanding, your inferential abilities. Let us see if you can answer the questions correctly. So let's start with question number 5. It's the main idea question. If you answer this correctly, it basically means that you have done an excellent job in summarizing the passage. According to the passage, and when they say according to the passage, you have to basically talk about according to the author, not according to the government. Which of the following factors matters most for small businesses? It has to be red tapeism, which is how easy it is to work, how difficult is it to work. Okay, taxes is what the government thinks, but it's not about taxes. It's not, it's just a part, but it's basically about the procedure, red tapeism. Okay, so good job if you have understood the theme correctly. Moving on to question number 6. Let us see if you can arrange all these states in the ascending order of business friendliness. So, students, what is ascending order? It is something that starts from the lowest. We know that Texas is not at the lowest. California, Illinois, they have to be at the lowest because both of them flunked their test. Remember, they failed the test. Okay, now what do you remember about Texas? It was the highest, so it has to be here. Minnesota was a B, so this has to be here. You remember that Washington was a C and Florida was a C plus, and C plus is definitely higher than C. So this is your correct answer. You just had to observe, remember, and get the plus one that you deserve. Moving on to the next question, everyone. Question number 7. Remember Dennis Kessler, that accountant, his case. The question is asking you, why was the case cited? Why was that example given? Let us steer clear of generalizations. It will be wrong to say that all the government rules are a headache. It will really be wrong to say that. I think this example was given because there's too much time, too much hassle, so many rules. That was the thing. Okay. And it was not just about Kessler, it was a representation of the system. So remember that. Moving on to the last question of this passage, you have to make the inference from the last paragraph, and these inference is about Chicago. Remember what Chicago was doing? They were not permitting food trucks to operate near restaurants. And you have been asked, why was that so? Okay, so see, in such cases, you will have to make conclusions, and conclusions should be based on justified assumptions. If you say anything about incompetence or shoddiness or crime, will you be able to justify that? Why would there will be a difference because of the distance? No, right? It is just about the competition that the restaurant owners are facing, and Chicago is trying to be fair. Okay, so on that note, we have covered two RCs as I promised, and I hope that you are doing well. If you have scored 5 plus, then I think it's a good score. Okay, moving on to the last RC of this class. It's about branding. See, I really believe in variety because Clat believes in variety. So first RC was about hiring, firing, okay, that kind of thing. Second was about the problems of the system. The third is about marketing and branding. So let us see how you do here. And this is a treat for you because this is the entire passage. So that's it. You understand this, you summarize this, and we head directly towards the questions. Students, all is well. That ends well. We are solving the last RC of this class. Do try to do very well. Well, all right, that's it. Your time is up. What are we reading here? What are we discussing here? We are trying to find out if a brand is the most important thing, most valuable asset for a company, more than its machinery, more than its technical know-how, more than its property. Is brand value the most important thing? And if you're thinking there are any clear answers, I'm sorry, there are not, because there are both kinds of views. So one view, which is held by given by David Cooper, who says, yes, brands are super important. Our customers are going to die for brands. That's one kind of view. And the other kind of view is a cooler kind of view where you'd see that no, consumers are not out there just waiting for your brand, okay? Just thinking about your brand. You can't expect that kind of lasting commitment from any consumer, okay? So you do see both kinds of views. Moving on, you got to read about different kinds of brands. For example, some brands are very distinctive. Let us say Harvard Business Review. What they do is so unique, nobody else is doing it. But some brands are very hard to tell apart. For example, it's some kind of cola, or if it's some kind of Pepsi, it's so similar. In some brands, marketing advertising doesn't really work. What works is the ability to connect with people, give them good service. So you read all that when it came to brand qualities. And in the last, you understood something about brand equity. Brand equity, as defined by Professor Aker, David Aker, you see, is a composition of three things. So it has something called brand loyalty, how committed people are to your brand. It was something about brand recognition. Do they even know about your brand? Do they know the qualities that are associated with it? And then brand recall. Are they aware? Can they recall? Okay, so if you have summarized all of this, I think we are pretty ready to discuss the first question. Please try question number 9. You have to water down Cooper's argument. That means you have to dilute it, you have to weaken it. And if there are two options that are weakening, you have to go with the one that most waters down. So you don't need an option that says that brands are really important. For example, option D. You don't need a hypothetical, for example, option A, because that won't be very strong. Now, if you compare it between B and C, you'll see that this is talking about companies in question, which means some companies, some particular companies. And when you look at option B, you will see that this is about all the companies in general. So, of course, if I want most damage, it has to be done by B. Because when I say no one agrees on how much brands are worth, that means Cooper, who was saying people will die for brands, his argument gets destroyed. Let's move on to question number 10. Okay, so which of the following is not mentioned as a brand characteristic? See, being a class of your own, having your own identity among competitors, this was mentioned when we talked about Harvard Business Review. Having potential for emotional investment, I did not find this, but service orientedness was discussed when we were talking about banks. So, another question where observation is involved. Moving on to the next question, which is very easy, super easy. You should definitely get a +1 here. Very simple. When you are talking about brand equity, to define it, you will obviously not use the same term. Fidelity, loyalty was there, differentiation was there, recall, awareness, all of these were there. Okay, time for the last question of the class. Do your very best. Which of the following refers to the cooler view? Remember what was cooler view? Yes, you're right. It was about D, that brands do not expect people to give long-term relationships to your brand because they're not out there thinking only about your brand. So, what all did we achieve today, everyone? We solved three RCs. It covered most important question types. We had inferential questions, contextual vocabulary question, main idea question. We had to understand the author's take. That's all there is. I hope you learned something from the session today. It helped you. I'd love to hear from you about what else I can help you with. I'll be back with more such sessions. See you soon. Bye bye. Have a good day and use whatever you have learned today. Okay. I really want your RC scores to go up, and they will if you solve the way you solved with me. Bye bye.